Hey guys, so lesson 3 is about cell transport. Okay, so passive transport is what we mean when we say diffusion. Diffusion is just the tendency of a concentrated area of particles to want to spread out. So you can see how it works in cells. There's going to be that cell membrane with the lipid bilayer, and in this scenario, we have outside of the cell, there's a higher concentration of particles or solutes. And you're going to see that over time, the higher concentration of solutes are on one side than the other. And what they're going to want to do is diffuse. So diffusion will cause like the net movement of the solute particles from the side of the membrane that has a higher concentration to move to the side with a lower concentration of solutes. When it's at equilibrium, the particles will move equally in both directions, so there's no net change. This is a similar concept, like if you spray an air freshener in the air, the concentration is going to be really strong around you, and then it'll slowly dissipate, and then eventually you don't smell it anymore because your body gets used to it, and the solute will dissipate. All right, so passive transport is facilitated diffusion. Okay, and we've got something called the aquaporin here. Oops. Let's go back. Well, it won't let me. All right, well, passive transport would be considered osmosis as well. What you're going to see is that this aquaporin is what allows particles to move from inside the cell to outside the cell. Things like water can move. And again, this is your cell membrane that it will be passing through. So aquaporins allow water movement. We have another particle here called sugar in green, and they can pass through the aquaporins as well. Okay, so for osmosis. So the trick to understanding osmosis is understanding the movement of the water molecules, not those particles. Okay, so we have to also kind of recognize where the arrows are, what the arrows are showing us in the movement. Okay, so if we have a lower concentration of sugar molecules on this side of the membrane barrier, and then a higher concentration of sugar molecules on this side of the membrane barrier, what do we think is going to happen? All right, and we're looking at how the water levels are even here. Sorry, I'm tired. And when the water level rises, it's on that more concentrated solution side. Okay, so the water moved through the membrane to try and dilute the solutes on this side, make it more equal. So that's what osmosis is referring to, the movement of water. Okay, so the effects of osmosis on cells, and we will look at this through the egg osmosis videos we'll watch in class. So when we have a solution that is isotonic, an animal cell will have water in and out, meaning it's consistent. All right, plant cells. The cell membrane cell wall is here. You see the central vacuole where all that water, excess water, is stored, and it allows movement of water in and out. When you have a hypertonic solution that a cell is surrounded by, the water will want to move out. This is the process of osmosis. It will want to move out, so the cell will shrink. Okay, when you have a plant cell, it is the same thing. The water will want to move out, so it will look like dehydrated if it's placed in a hypertonic solution. All right, so then hypotonic, if you place a cell in a hypotonic solution, the water from outside of the cell will diffuse, through the process of osmosis, it will move into the cell. All right, so you'll see that the cells will swell if it's placed in a hypotonic solution. Okay, so And osmosis happens without any energy. All right, just keep that in mind when we move. Now we're moving on to things that do require energy, active transport. Okay, so active transport is using ATP. Once ATP gets used, it releases a phosphate. It becomes ADP. We'll talk more about that when we talk about cell respiration. But we talked about protein pumps being in the cell membrane. And so these protein pumps require energy in order to pump molecules through the cell membrane. All right, and that happens in a vesicle. Typically, they encase it in a vesicle to move it out of the cell as well. All right, so these are the two different types of active transport. We call them endocytosis when a vesicle moves into the cell, and exocytosis. Exo is like exit, leaves the cell. Okay, so lesson 4 is about homeostasis in cells. The cell as an organism. So to maintain homeostasis, unicellular organisms grow, respond to the environment, transform energy, and reproduce. In a multicellular organism, it becomes specialized for particular tasks, and it communicates with one another to maintain homeostasis. So all of these cells work together to communicate to find out what they need. Specialized animal cells, they in this picture are stained pink. The cells stained pink are the red blood cells. Oh, I'll have to finish recording later. All right, so in this slide here, we're talking about specialized animal cells, and animals have a variety of different cells that are, we call them differentiated cells. So they carry oxygen. For example, the red blood cells carry oxygen to cells of your body. They pick up carbon dioxide as waste. They bring them to your lungs so that you can then reoxygenate your blood through your heart and pump it through your body. And so all of these differentiated cells have to work together in every animal in order to maintain homeostasis. So even plants have specialized plant cells. They have chloroplasts in them. Cactuses or cacti, they have like C4 plants, they have specialized systems where they can photosynthesize even in the dark, because during the day they have to focus on survival and closing their stomata, and there's all these things that we'll talk about later in the year as far as specialized plant cells when we do the plant unit. But just in general, understand that there are differentiated cells in every system, every living thing. Okay, and so we have to talk about levels of organization here. So, for example, we have a neuron, which would be a cell. We have nerve tissue, and then the nerve tissue would make up the organ, for example, the brain, and then overall the organ system, for example, the organs in the body make up a larger system. So in this case, we're looking at the nervous system here. So please understand the levels of organization of cells. All right, and all cells have to communicate, and they communicate in different ways. So, for example, your neurons, you respond to touch. Some cells, will need to get different nutrients from your blood. So in order to do that, they use their cell membrane, and they find those membrane proteins that allow them to pass through the membrane. There's just lots of examples of cellular communication, so I think that would be a good thing for you to go ahead and Google and research a little bit more on. All right, so that is the end of the second part of the lecture. I will see you guys later. Have a great evening, because you should be watching this at night because it's a flipped classroom. All right.